It is a perfect day for car racing here at Sydney Motorsport Park, and we're set for the big boys to come out for the over 2 litre final in the 2023 Yokohama Improved Production Nationals.
And as we look to our grid here for the Improved Production Nationals over 2 litre final, of course, being brought to you by Ravenol. Of course, some Ravenol had to find its way into a couple of cars when they were a bit low on oil. The TRP ductwork Monaro with assistance from Ravage Raceworks. What an amazing piece of equipment that is. Zach Hudson doing things that no one should ever consider having to be done in an RX-7. It's a 20-year-old car that's had a huge amount of development into it. Huge thanks to Phil Laird for prepping that car.
And the current champion.
And the current champion, of course, wearing the number 1 nameplate on the doors. Scott Cook aboard the number 261. We saw normally aspirated Sylvias earlier. We've got a turbocharged example from South Australia. Stephen Engel aboard the number 36 Lancer Evo 7. I've taken to calling him the Rocket Man because of all of his starts this weekend. He has absolutely rocketed to the front straight.
Four-wheel drive helps there, doesn't it?
Mick Hazelton aboard the Mick Race Mazda RX-7. Did not expect to be this far up the grid, but another person getting lightning starts. Ben Algie, the Nissan Silvia S15, RX-7s, an Escort with a turbocharged engine under the bonnet for Bruce Cook. Looking further afield through our over 2 litre final, Stig Richards, another RX-7, the Rotaries, a bastion of improved production success over the years. A Holden Tirana for those of you who like your classic Holden varieties. New Holden Commodore VE for Brandon Lum. Lee Forrest, one of the longest serving improved production competitors.
Every nationals bar one, and the only one he missed was his home state one.
Lachlan McBrien, what a story he's had throughout the course of the weekend. A New South Wales competitor with Jason Grimman, Brad Harris, Graham Wilkinson aboard a slightly bigger 2.4 litre Escort. Simon Odell Fontana will not be able to take the start of the race. Brock Payne starting from P18. In P19, Graham Shea. Gary McKay, he's having an absolute hot weekend, is the Victorian aboard the Tirana. Mark DeFarnas in the VF Commodore has had to head home early to make work tomorrow. Jeff Kingston aboard the RX-7 doing well. Jason Palmer, one of my favourites, driving a BMW E30. And of course, David Vincent the Bear aboard the BMW E36. Adam Wiedemann, another retirement withdrawal early from the race, unfortunately. Personal dramas back home, he's got to look after those. Brett Waters aboard the Peugeot. Massive issues with power steering in that car. New kill switch in that car overnight. Mayan Reddy, one of our sponsors aboard the Midas Auto Car Care, of course, the BMW M3R. And Steve Jolly, the longest distance travelled by from Western Australia for that Ford Falcon in P28.
Mark Hawana in the Mazda RX-7, Dave Perry in his Nissan Bluebird, and James, well, he's not there, he's gone home. So James Augustine.
What a story for Jamie Augustine from Motorsport Australia. Only person I know who's blown up 3 engines in a week trying to make the Improved Production Nationals. So shout out to wherever you're watching from, Jamie, and all the team from Monument Motorsport. And of course, Mark DeFarnas making the trip back to Melbourne. They did everything they could to get a competitive turbocharged Silvia up the front. Field filling out to fill up the downhill starting grid. Very difficult to get a launch here from further back up the grid without rolling at the start. So a little bit of handbrake, a little bit of 2-pedal action to try to keep the car from rolling down the hill. Yellow flags from our Motorsport Australia officials on drivers left, identifying the different rows. They're being withdrawn as the cars take up their positions. It's a normally aspirated rotary RX-7 on the front up against a big V8. Late model versus early model. Holden versus Mazda. Australia versus Japan. These are the battles that make improved production ready to watch as we wait for the green flag at the back of the grid. Starters orders kick in. The starter displays the 5-second board. This is what it's all been to play for. The Ravenol over 2 litre final. Revs rise at Sydney Motorsport Park, and away we go. Not too much wheel spin from our front runners, but where does the fight come from the back? Angle from the second row, blocked off. Does not get to do a Rocket Man start as the field peels through turn 1. Scott Cook being squeezed by Algie there. You can get too wide through turn 1.
They did it with just about a quarter of the track to play with. A
little bit of debris, one of the foam signs chewed absolutely by the Tirana car starting out of Christopher Thomas starting out of P10.
He'll make some ground up. He's already passed the Commodore going up over the tunnel. But if Poole needed to do a really good start. He did it this time round. He got away well. A couple of the previous heats, he was about third into the first corner.
Dust kicks up as the cars fly through turns 4 and 5. It's up, it's down, it's left, it's right. It's on camber, off camber. Huge dynamics to deal with. As up the inside looks Zach Hudson, Adam Poole leaves space for the car and deploys all over 600 horsepower from that Chevrolet LS through the Hollinger 6-speed gearbox to the rear wheels. But Zach's car hugely quick through the twisty sections. We've watched seesaw battles between them in these in the heat races earlier, where the car just ever so slightly has the edge in the corners, but cannot argue with a big Holden V8 running down the straight.
Straight line handling has a lot to do with it, and interestingly enough, both our first and second competitors came here and did club events just to get a feel for the place. They hadn't been here before. Zach Hudson did one in April. Adam Poole came here in May to make sure that they had some sort of knowledge about what they needed to get coming to this event.
Speaking of getting the most out of the event, Lockie McBrien was absolutely dominating his heat race on Saturday afternoon. And then, unfortunately, a gearbox oil leak DNF'd the first heat, and that handed the win in the first heat to Kurt McCready. He's one to watch as he starts out of position 13, currently running in P9. Another recovery drive, of course, is the number 8, Jason Grimman, Grimmo's Garage, the bright green Commodore. You will not miss that car. Lockie McBrien aboard the BM's Garage E46. He definitely knows what it needs to make the tyres last for that 14-lap distance. We've had very few safety cars in improved production, notwithstanding the one we had in the under 2-litre final before. These drivers are driving within an inch of the capabilities of their tyres, seeing compression locks from the tyres as they rub inside the extended guards of the RX-7 of Ash Isaracina, putting a good job in. Wants to make sure he finishes top 5. That was his stated goal. Had a really good run through the heats so far. A little bit of a shark bite in the door, though, from contact from a fellow competitor, inadvertent. Not his fault in the slightest. Mick Hazelton throws it up the inside of the Evo. Not quite enough space there, but the Evo gives it the room. But does the turbocharged 4G63 and all-wheel drive give Engel enough to make it back? Zach Hudson keeping very close watch on Adam Poole here. This is the closest they've run all race meeting.
Yeah, it's interesting because two years ago he gave Ray Hislop a real run for his money at basketball in Tasmania. So the car has all the advantages over the back of the track. It just doesn't have any on the main straight where he possibly would need it.
I was watching in the grandstand yesterday in the first heat race. Over 255 kilometres an hour for Adam Poole as he sets the fastest lap of the race so far on the second lap. The first flying lap, a 39.3. Still a ways away from his fastest lap so far. Over 30 kilometres an hour faster through the speed trap as Ash Isaracina holds out the Evo of Engel. Lockie McBrien ranges up on the outside. So much grip from that longer wheelbase and wider track of the E46 M3. A delicious 3.2-litre 6-cylinder engine deploying over 400 horsepower to the rear tyres. He's upgraded to a Drenth 6-speed sequential gearbox to try to improve the power run. That's not how you get the power delivery in the number 17.
That's Chris Thomas, and that's the way he drives it. We've seen him here running in improved production, supporting supercars during the COVID, and he was very entertaining to watch and fast as well.
So that's the number. He's having a run with Payne aboard the RX-7 there in back of shot. So many different strengths and weaknesses for these cars. He definitely wants to try to finish top 10. Started out at P18 and running in 11th so far. So he wants to see if he can just get just one more step, but he's going to have to see 3 wide on the run to the final turn complex. Grimmo's Garage, number 8. Definitely can't miss that green VY Commodore.
He certainly knows enough about Tiranas as Chris Thomas. He runs one in Appendix J Group N racing as well, so if he doesn't know how to pedal one of these, no one would. At the moment, though, Brock Payne seems to have a little bit more squirt in the straight line. Mazda pulls out, or attempt to go around. He's got a problem.
No, I think that's just the difference in straight line handling between cars with the big donks for the big day and the cars with the twin rotor spinning Doritos. Look how much time he takes out a Grimo on the run through turn 1. Lower frontal area, so much slippery in a straight line.
It just looked like he may have not got the last gear change right, because it almost like it stopped.
Sitting in the grandstands here, free entry for the Shannon's Motorsport Australia Trophy Series. Of course, sitting up in the grandstand, you see a huge variation of lines and approaches to turn 1. Lockie McBrien, a special shout out for him. Zach Hudson, you'd say, is definitely taking it up to our leader.
Oh, Ben Algie.
As Ben Algie aboard the number 77 Sylvia. We saw him have fuel pressure issues in the previous heat. I wonder if this is connected to that, and heads out to the paddock. That car will not rejoin the race. Speaking of a race on our hands, Big Flames, I think he's the winner of the race cars that shoot fire are better than race cars that don't shoot fire award.
There it is.
Definitely gets them for length. Of course, this car's running E85, an electric water pump. Still runs the Holden 202 engine under the bonnet, but it's substantially more developed than it was back in the 1970s. Mayan Reddy defending from the other E36 BMW. That's the number 55 of David Vincent. He's known as the Bear, but he's got the RX-7 tucked in behind. All set is the RX-7s. You know, we've seen a changing of the guard in improved production over the years. 20 years ago, you had to have an RX-7 to be at the front, and we saw fleets of them being developed in all states of Australia. Now, with the adoption of the AO50 tyre, we've seen a broadening, a democratisation of the cars that can be competitive and improve production.
Four-wheel drive turbo cars had a real good run for a while. They're still around, of course, but now it seems to be the home for the 6-litre variety of V8 cars at the front end, at the bigger circuits, not so much at the smaller circuits.
So Thomas and Payne still having this absolute ding-dong battle for 9th and 10th. Grimo holding down P11. So Payne will have to keep his work rate up so he keep Grimo behind him if he wants to stay in that top 10 like his stated aim was heading into this over 2-litre final. Thomas taking a very wide entry. Payne trying to carry corner speed. He'll be a little bit bottled up. Bruce Cook aboard the 137. That car definitely not known for its cornering prowess, but absolutely has the straight line handling to see off some of the competitors. Payne up the inside, late on the brakes into turn 6. Reprofiled since the last time the Improved Production Nationals were held here in the mid-90s. Around the back of Corporate Hill. And a little bit of a tap on the brakes there for Grimo's Garage. He's got a watching brief. He's got the best seat in the house for this race.
Certainly has. He won't got more part of it as well, I would imagine.
So Payne now raging up on Cook. He'll need to make sure he maximises his speed through turn 1 and have a look at turn 2, because if he's stuck behind, oh no, the cam wheel palms, the number 91 big 2.4-litre engine escort of Graham Wilkerson is pulled over. I think that's on the exit of turn 3. And by the looks of things, right next to the flag post. Just getting information, it's between turns 5 and 6 where we've seen a lot of action occur this weekend, Graham.
This battle still goes on now. We can see Grimman come out, and you can see the straight line performance of the V8 versus the 6-cylinder. And he passes Thomas down the straight, and Thomas will be all over him over the back of the track.
So 5.5 laps completed of our scheduled 14. This will be a time-certain race if we go under safety car for too long a period. Look at this battle that's unfolding at the back. Ready from the Bear, David Vincent. We've got Graham Shea in there as well in the RX-7. And here comes Mark Harwood, the purveyor of the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. Raised over $7.5 million US last year for the Distinguished Gentleman Ride, partnering with Movember. And of course, this isn't just his first nationals. This is his first circuit racing event. What a race meeting! Here we go with the Shannon's replay. So, Vincent with a big lockup that opened up the gap on the inside for Mayan Reddy. Graham Shea wants to dice of that as well, and they're all now starting to catch Gary McKay aboard the GP Automotive Tirana.
McKay still firing flame out of it at the moment. It's still Adam Perland out in front, and he's actually started to pull a little bit away from Zach Hudson in second spot.
Well, we can hear that car make its way past our commentary booth. No mistaking the sound of the big V8. So 6 laps down, 8 to run. So just under 24 kilometres completed, and just over 31 kilometres left to run for the Improved Production finale. So race control's monitoring the position of that car 91. They seem to be fairly happy with leaving it there. They'll show a local yellow for a lap or two, and then Kay Callender and the rest of the Motorsport Australia race control will, swallow the whistle and shout play on.
Yeah, well, it's more or less just to let everyone know that there is a car there. Once they all know, then it's game on.
After 2 laps, it's part of the racetrack. Treat it and drive accordingly.
Yeah.
So we mentioned that there's always someone to race in improved production. We're seeing one of the best battles now unfolding from P18 down to P22. So Kingston, as we see, and just as I say, commentators curse strikes again. David Vincent, the Bear, finding the pressure a little bit too much there. And that's actually a left-hand front suspension failure going on there. Don't know whether there was contact, but just trying to drive it far enough away from the circuit that this won't cause a safety car.
We did see him have that big lock up into turn 8, and whether the failure happened then, and he avoided. I don't think he hit Thomas at the time, so.
It doesn't just look like a tyre failure. The wheel is pointed with a significantly more amount of toe in than would be suitable for an E36 chassis
in a different direction to the one on the other side.
Yeah, a little bit like when you've had one too many at the pub on Friday night and you try to stagger home and you end up with your toes touching and your heels apart. That's what toe in looks like, folks. Gary Mackay, 6-cylinder versus 6-cylinder versus 2 13B RX-7s. Wanting to keep it, the donut garage sponsored car. Of course, plenty of fine, tasty snacks to find in the paddock in improved production where the teams handle most of their own catering. Graham Shea, just happy to be here in a car that used to run a carburetted 12A rotary engine, now running a Wolf engine management controlled 13B engine, one of the longest serving cars in improved production racing. He said he leased it for a couple of years before he ended up buying it. And of course, we see a lot of cars change hands within the improved production community. And I dare say there'll be a few cars up for sale after the end of the Nationals that might find some entrepreneurial new owners ready to have a taste of Yokohama improved production racing.
So this battle continues, and here is another battle that's also continuing.
So Cook from Thomas and Grimo. So turbocharged 4-cylinder early model, V8.
Lee Forrest into the pits.
No. Lee Forrest run of Nationals takes a hit, doesn't manage to complete the final.
Actually, the only one he missed was because he was suffering influenza at the time and he couldn't race.
Well, he certainly, while he might be suffering from influenza, he's been one of the most influential members of the improved production community. Over 20 years of Nationals aboard that RA70 Celica. Runs a later model turbocharged Toyota engine and just nuts away and develops it. And he's got a beautiful bus in the pit lane. As we see another car head for the pit lane, we do tend to see a battle of attrition. Gary Mackay now under fire from Mark Hauer. He's certainly put up a valiant defence, but the Mazda reigns supreme over the Holden. It's 5-second gap between our leaders out the front. We go back to see the TRP ductwork Monaro. It's all about tyre conservation. He's starting to lap some of the back markers. Blue flags from our Motorsport Australia trackside officials. The next car that he'll head to is Brett Waters, the national administrator for the 3J improved production rules. He's had to do quite a lot of rule studying to try to find a way to get that Peugeot 208 GDI of his to function. A number of electrical gremlins, particularly around the power steering. Doesn't like dicing over the curbs. One of the cars that uses all the track and all the curbs, of course, is our number 1, Zach Hudson, the RX-7. He's in position 2, looking to take out the 2 to 3 litre class.
How's the camber on the front of that car?
How's the sideways action through turn 6 on the downside approach? New engine went in that car yesterday to try to make sure they had as few hours as possible. Here's Ash Isaracina dicing it up in P6 as we go back to see Zach Hudson now looking to overtake some of the back markers. Brett Waters, eyes on the mirror, will be well in tune. Now, we talked about front-wheel drive cars pitching a rear wheel in the air. There's an all-wheel drive Evo picking up its left-hand rear wheel as it fires through turn 5. Look at the amount of camber they run on the front of these cars to make the Yokohama Advan AO50 control tyre work. You couldn't find two of the more different cars, early model, late model, 4-wheel drive. And there's a story from the rear of the grid. The number 59, driven by Steve Jolly, It's travelled the furthest to get here from Western Australia. The original driver unfortunately had a medical episode, had to go into emergency surgery in the New South Wales health system throughout the week, handed the car over to his brother, Steve Jolly, and has had an amazing run just to get that car onto the grid from Western Australia. As we see the shark bite in the left-hand side. Now here's a story. Palmer from South Australia, second ever Nationals, first time away from home for the Nationals, runs the same engine that's in Lockie McBrien's E46 M3, and dicing up in the early model
Because that's
E46.
where the rules are. As long as the engine comes from the same manufacturer, you can use it.
Correct.
It doesn't have to have been in the model when it was first built, but
We see updating, we see backdating, we see fuel injection on cars that came with carburetors. We've seen carburetors on cars that came with fuel injection. So a huge shout out to all of our improved production competitors that couldn't make it here today, that are tuned in on 7+, your home for motorsport action from the Shannon's Trophy Series for Motorsport Australia. A little bit further ahead, we can see the RX-8 of Bradley Harris. Of course, Brad's been dicing up on board the Honda Civic TCR car in Super Cheap Auto TCR Australia Series. Tries to carry the speed around through turn 1, but has Palmer up the inside of him, goes for the crisscross. They'll run side by side. Who can break the latest on the run into turn 2?
and that is a RX-8 Cup.
It is an RX-8 Cup car, of course. Just change the stickers and change the tyres, and it's ready to run in Yokohama Improved Production Racing.
And he had a win out here just a couple of weeks ago in that car, in the RX-8 Cup Series.
Beautiful platform, the RX-8. Just needs another 200 or 300 horsepower to be outright competitive. So our leader, Adam Poole, with just over a 6-second gap, or just under 6-second gap now, making his way through the back markers, has now lapped up to P16 now. So this is where you've got to race with, you've got to use far more brain than you do feet and hands. You've got to look after the rear tyre. You've got to drive the car to the number. You can't slide it. You can't overheat it. As you see, just a little wiggle coming through turn 4. Just a little wiggle. Yeah. We're now getting into the danger zone. We're in lap 11 of 14. We're going beyond the distance that most of these cars normally run. So it starts to test the endurance of both the driver and the tyre management of the driver as well.
And everything you hear in the car will be, is it going to last? Is it going to stick together? Get out of the way as this battle continues.
Every marble of discarded Yokohama rubber that fixed the underside of the vehicle sounds like it's been shot out of a gun. Every time you accidentally drop a wheel just too far of the curb, it shatters, it rattles your bones, and you wonder, is this going to be the last time the car holds together? A little bit of smoke from the back end of Isaracina. Not uncommon to see that from the rotaries, where they have to add a little bit of engine oil to the fuel to lubricate the rotary engines.
Oh, he got a bit wild going into turn 6 on that occasion. Just a little bit loose.
I'd wager that Ash is just starting to struggle with that rear tyre condition. Depending upon the way you set the balance up, some of the cars have got adjustable in-car anti-roll bars. One person who has them definitely needs to make an adjustment to them is the number 33 of Brock Payne, running comfortably in P8. He told me in the paddock, my goal is to finish top 10. He's in position to do that, but not if he keeps driving it like that.
Yeah, having it move around a little bit on that occasion.
So this is a battle between New South Wales and Queensland, turbocharged and normally aspirated, 4 cylinders and rotaries. As we catch the back of David Vincent's E36 in the background, he's got one of the best seats in the house to watch the over 2-litre final from the top of the straight. Gets to see all the different dynamics of the cars they pound through the 9, 10, 11 turn complex here that finishes off the lap at Sydney Motorsport Park.
So Poole leads Hudson by just over 7 seconds. Scott in 3rd, McBrien in 4th, Hazelton in 5th spot, and then we go back to this dice.
So it comes back to who makes the fewest mistakes. You can't trip up and sneak over the ripple strip. You can't pinch a tyre. When you add so much camber to the front axle to get the tyres to work in the corner, what you also do is you lose contact patch under braking. So that means that the face of the tyre that's touching the road, it just doesn't have the same contact patch size. So when it's in the corners, it's brilliant, but under brakes, very easy to nip a tyre and mark one of your Yokohamas. So Payne tries to sell the dummy on the run into turn 6. Angle, a lot of curb on the inside of turn 6. They cross over some of the soaker that's been left down to cover some of the oil dropped down in some of the earlier races from the Australian production cars and GT4. So Angle goes to look up the inside.
Got close.
Isaracina goes to leave space. A little bit of wheel spin maybe and a little bit of smoke from that engine. Angle not quite enough, not able to unwind the steering enough to deploy all that turbocharged horsepower down. Oh no, it becomes survival of fittest, and we hate to see it, but Gary McKay is not having as hot a weekend as he'd hoped. The number 63 GP Automotive Tirana puts the indicator on. He's headed back to the paddock. That car will take no further part in the race. I certainly need to make sure we put him up for the award for the race cars that shoot fire.
Yes, indeed. And Payne making a move on Angle as we go down the straight. Not quite close enough to get it done.
As we reset our timing screen in the Blendline TV transmission booth. So Adam Poole with the fastest lap of the race, a 1:39.3. Several tenths away from his fastest lap so far this weekend. Did mention that he wasn't interested in setting numbers. He did that at the last state race meeting.
Angle spin down at turn 2.
I mentioned it was a battle of who can make the fewest mistakes. Angle, unfortunately, just looping the car at the turn 2 complex.
There was contact there or not. And he spun it around trying to get going again, by the look of it.
So we'll see if our camera operators can bring us a replay from down turn 2. It's been a bit of an action zone throughout the Improved Production Nationals this weekend. Lights go on for Ash Isaracina as he starts to overtake some of the back markers. He's running in P6, so he's got 9 seconds to chase down Mick Hazelton in the number 64 to try to meet his goal of finishing top 5.
We're on the last lap at the moment, so it's almost all over. Adam Poole leading the way over 9 seconds ahead of Zach Hudson, who is the reigning champion. He's not the defending champion. He doesn't lose it.
But
So he
certainly,
gets to hold on to it for...
he's enjoyed having the number 1 on this weekend.
He loses the number 1. That's
He loses number 1, but only for the Nationals. He still gets to keep the number 1 after his performance in the Improved Production Queensland Championship when he heads back to his state events. What can we say about Adam Poole? Dominated Victorian Improved Production racing in 2022. Dominated South Australian Improved Production racing in 2022. Missed the 2022 Nationals. Couldn't make the trip to Queensland to try to claim the number 1 plate. He's had an amazing run of success, finished at the front in all the heat races, has never been headed. He's looked after those Yokohama rear tyres as he starts to head towards the final complex of turns. The TRP ductwork Monaro lights ablaze, deploying all 600 horsepower. He just got to get through the last 2 corners and deploy all 6 speeds of that Hollinger 6-speed transmission. Put your hands together at home or at the track, folks. This is the man that you've come to see, and he's put on an absolute display in the over 2-litre final presented by Ravenol. Lights ablaze, signals to the Ravage Raceworks crew. Job well done, brought it home in P1.
Zach Hudson threw everything he could in the early laps at the winner, and ultimately will come home in the line 11 seconds in arrears of the Monaro.
Second outright, but first in the 2 to 3 litre class. It's a big gap back to Scott Cook in the number 261, Sylvia. He'll be second in the over 3 litre class. He's got to bring it home. 20 seconds in arrears to Hudson as our operators find Mick Hazelton coming through the field in the number 42. My apologies, that's Stig Richards, who couldn't make last year's Nationals in Improved Production after an emergency episode to get some kidney stones taken care of. Great to have him here. He's just happy to be here in the number 42. It's the first Nationals he's ever tried to get to successfully as he comes through the final complex of turns. Scott Cook finishes P3. Lockie McBrien, P4. He's third in the over 3 litre class. Mick Hazelton in the 64. Ash Isaracina finishes third in that 2 to 3 litre class. Brock Payne, Jason Grimman for Grimmo's Garage, Stig Richards, Thomas in P10. Bruce Cook in the number 11 brings the car home. We see he doesn't need those tyres anymore. Dean Herridge is going to have a huge amount of rubber build-up to deal with when that car arrives in the victory lane here at Sydney Motorsport Park. as we see David Vincent got to watch the finale from the top of the circuit, and a huge number of cars not able to make the finish. Harwer, McKay, Forrest, Reddy, Vincent, Wilkinson, Algie, and then, of course, the cars that didn't make it to the final: Odell Fontana, Mark DeFarnis, Wiedemann, and, of course, our own Motorsport Australia safety rep, Jamie Augustine, not able to make it after 3 engine failures before the end of Friday. So that wraps up an amazing Yokohama Improved Production Nationals final. Poole from Hudson by 11 seconds. Cook, McBrien, Hazelton, Issa Racina, Brock Payne, Jason Grimman, Stig Richards and Chris Thomas was your top 10. Adam Poole with the fastest lap of the race, a 1:39.3. Bruce Cook from Stephen Engel. Brandon Lum in the 3E production car with a cam, and it was our last finisher on the lead lap, ahead of Jason Palmer, Brad Harris, Graham Shea, Jeff Kingston, Brett Waters. And then the story of woe continues. Perry and Jolly, all those cars, and Mark Harwer, Gary McKay, Lee Forrest, Mayan Reddy. So many stories to tell from our Over 2 Litre final.
Adam Poole, congratulations, mate. You are the outright winner of the 2023 Yokohama Improved Production Nationals, but it wasn't as easy as it looked out on track.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, no, it wasn't as easy as we'd hoped. We had to work for it pretty hard. The guys behind Zach really pushed us. He had a lot of pace on, was trying really hard. So we had to, be a bit mindful about how quick we were going and look after it. But yeah, very happy. Great. It's been a fantastic event all around. So yeah, thank you.
Some of those, those half-capacity cars were really giving the big V8 a bit of a nudge, weren't they?
Yeah, they sure were. And look, that's a real credit to the IPRA New South Wales under 2 litre community. They produce amazing cars, really well tended. They present well. They're super fast, particularly here. They're outright pace. So yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it was hard work.
So, and this is to point out too, this will be your second visit to Sydney Motorsport Park, so a pretty happy hunting ground for you.
Yeah, absolutely. We were really unsure about how we were going to go here when we first arrived a couple of weeks ago. Pleasantly went pretty quick. So, absolutely right. It's a happy hunting ground. I'll definitely be back without question.
Awesome, mate. Anybody you'd like to thank?
Look, I'd like to thank Cameron, my mechanic in Adelaide. He preps the car. It's pretty hard to keep on the road, as you imagine. And Dean Lilly from Ravage Raceworks, he sort of comes over and makes sure I got my head screwed on properly. So I'd like to thank those guys, and then my family and wife for letting us do this, right? So thank you. Yeah.
Awesome, mate. Well, congratulations.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah.